Thank you, Brianna. Can we move on to Charlie? For
Yeah, I'll make it short. I don't think systemic racism exists, so the burden of proof's on you. There's racism, individual racist, it's disgusting, reprehensible. We'll agree on that. But the systems themselves are not racist. There's nothing that I can do that you can't do. You went to Harvard. It's pretty awesome. I didn't. So that's not a racist country. So yeah, the burden's on you to prove it.
Charlie, is it your belief that if there is one example of something, that an anomalous example proves the rule?
No, not always, but can you name one example?
Of systemic racism?
Yeah.
So what did you think about the example I brought up in my opening remarks? The example of housing discrimination and redlining.
Like redlining? Yeah, so
with redlining?
You know Thomas Sowell's treatise on redlining?
I don't.
Yeah, you should read it.
What does it say? Are you able to tell me
Yeah,
in this
it's
moment?
actually right here. He said, redlining, do you know that whites were turned down for mortgages more than Asians?
I'm unclear what relevance that has
Because
to
it wasn't racially based. The redlining myth, according to Thomas Sowell, which I'm sure you believe in, says, quote, nor did either the mainstream media or political leaders ever mention the fact that black-owned banks turned down black mortgage loan applicants at least as often as white-owned banks did. Why were blacks turning down their own people?
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking
Obviously
about
you don't, because this is the facts.
Charlie, I would like to be very specific here.
I was just very specific.
So I'm talking about the GI Bill, which allowed people who had served in our wars, including a lot of black Americans, to come back and
No,
get
you're talking about redlining, right? So this is redlining.
This is connected to redlining.
No, which one do you want to talk about, GI Bill or redlining?
If you allow me to explain, this is connected to redlining.
Okay.
And I guess you don't understand that, but I'm happy to explain it to you right now if you just let me get this out. I promise you it'll be worth that. The GI Bill gave low interest loans to people who had served in the war, right? And those loans were issued they were federally backed loans. So the banks would issue to people at a low interest rate so that they could buy homes and generate what we now understand to be the basis of middle class wealth in this country. What ended up happening was the process of redlining was that banks said, oh, we're only going to issue loans for you to buy in certain neighborhoods.
Right, black banks.
All banks.
Right, so why did
Charlie,
black banks do that?
The overwhelming majority of issuers in this country.
No, you got to answer the question. Why did black banks do that?
I will answer your question. But what I'm talking about is the overwhelming majority of issuers, just like today, even more so back then, the overwhelming majority of issuers were white-owned banks. And those banks redlined communities where they said, we will not issue to people who live in these communities. Now, what ended up happening, what that meant for black people, was because of what's called a restrictive covenant, which meant that in the law, in the covenant that attached to the land for a lease, many of them precluded black people from buying in those neighborhoods. So basically what happened was banks would only lend to people and give those low interest loans to people who were allowed to live in white neighborhoods.